Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop. So in this video we're going to be forging a modern contemporary fireplace shovel. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm actually laying out the shovel body itself. I'm leaving enough extra material for the sidewalls, as this is all going to get bent up, or as you would say in tinning, broken up. We're going to break these, and I'm going to show you how I do that here in the next couple clips without having a sheet metal break. So really all we're doing here is just laying out about 2 inches of material outside what will be the finished dimensions of our fire shovel. And then we're going to cut that out on this Beverly shear. Now, I should be careful not to say that this is a Beverly shear. This is a cheap knockoff of a Beverly shear. If I can find a link to it on Amazon, I will put an Amazon affiliate link down in the description down below. At any rate, you can see that I've got a plate bolted to the bottom of this so I can use it in the hardy hole of the anvil. This thing has cut an amazing amount of material for different customer projects like this one that I'm working on. This is actually a client's job that I'm working on myself, so that's why we're voicing it over after the fact. I figured I could film it and bring you all along for the ride. The hardest thing on using a Beverly shear is to make sure that you don't get any suck down. Well, all metal has suck down when you're using a metal shear, so you always need to cut or counter that by cutting on the outside of whatever design line that you have, and then you'll have to, rasp it or clean it up later to take care of whatever little bit of suck down that you had on the piece. Now my blades need to be resharpened. They have, like I said, I have cut probably thousands of linear inches of steel and copper with this shear, so it's about time for me to sharpen these blades, as indicative of me having to peel off pieces like you saw there. So now here's my little handy trick. If you don't have a sheet metal break, you can always use a substantial piece of angle iron. It's great to have a couple pieces that are at different lengths for this purpose. This happens to be a pretty long length, and it's roughly 3/8 inch thick angle iron by about 2 inches, 2.5 inches or so in width. And this really makes a great hammering platform to break metal over. And pretty light gauge metal, you can do this. If you're heating with a torch, you can do a lot thicker than this. The gauge material that I'm working with right now is about 14 gauge material. So basically maybe say 12 gauge and under, you can use a material. You can use a method like this without having to break out a heating torch. So it's just perfect for something like a fire shovel, like what we're making here. Now, since we are going to have a back to this shovel, and then we're going to have sides that we're breaking up right now, you do need to make sure that it sticks out beyond, like you see here, the edge of the jaws of your vise when you break it up like this. And in the next clip, we'll actually switch to a much smaller piece of angle iron in order to get in between the two areas that we just broke up. Think of it kind of as a poor man's finger break. All I'm doing here is just crisping up the corners because I can. This particular piece of angle iron has a really nice sharp outside corner. That's why I like to use it for this purpose. And now I'm switching over to a piece of angle iron that'll fit between the two uprights of the left and the right. And again, just come in here and hammer it away. I'm directing my blows at the edge of the angle iron to help push the thing over really nice and tight. And then I'm coming down on top to help crisp up that line. as you can see from the end there, you can get some really nice tight bends on sheet material like this just using a piece of angle iron. It's just another example that you don't need $20,000 worth of tools and materials to be able to do projects like this. You know, if you don't have a sheet metal brake, no problem. Make your own. You just need a vise and a little bit of ingenuity. And there you have it. Next, we will bead our little flaps. As you can see with the flaps, I have went ahead and rounded them off. That is purely an aesthetic thing. You can choose to make them angled, if you will, like a bevel. You could make them any sort of shape that you like, fleur-de-lises on the end, whatever your mind can create, you can cut out on the end to spice this up yourself. But as this being a modern and contemporary look, the more of the modern designs mixed with the contemporary is really, they really like to have simple, plain, clean lines. And that's really what you want to put your efforts towards, is to have these really nice, simple, clean, and clear lines. So now we're going to work on the actual handle to this. I'm using a piece of 3/8 inch square bar. And I'm going to be upsetting this to just a fuzz over 1/2 inch of material. I'm going to just upset this material here. And I'll end up having to take another heat on this to get a little bit extra upset to it. We want to upset the end of this for about a cube of material to just a little over 1/2 inch in cross-sectional thickness. Make sure to leave your upset outside of the vise jaws, so this way you can not mar it all up or get any sort of galling behind the upset. So there you go. You can see how thick that is. Now we're going to dress that upset to center it up on the bar. And then we're going to pick one of the two planes of the surfaces and we're going to flatten it in that direction. And we're going to leave it thicker in the opposite. So this way we can create our little snub end on the end of this bar. Later on you'll see what I do to this, which is another quick little secretive trick that I like to use a lot to get two identical looking snubs on the end of a bar all close together. And you'll see what I'm talking about here if you stick around and watch the video. By the way, if you have made it this far in this video, comment down below and with the word snubbin scrolls. Anywho's, so here we go. We're just refining the snub on the end of this. I have complete video series on how to make snubbin scrolls, all sorts of scrolls, beginner techniques, and fundamentals. I really highly suggest that you check out the playlist section on my YouTube channel here at Christ-Centered Ironworks if you want to know how to do a lot of these processes in depth and in detail. We have, right now, I believe we have about 200 different playlists, and we are coming up on 1,500 videos strong on the channel in total. So if you're new here, definitely go check those out. There's a lot of great information here and education to be had in blacksmithing. So after we've finished shaping our snub on the end of our bar, we're going to start scrolling this up. But we're not going to fully scroll this. This is going to be the portion that's going to connect to the actual shovel pan itself. So really all I'm after here is just something that's starting to roll into a scroll. That will give the light impression like as if we were going to start a scroll with this. And once I got that, I will shift my focus to the center of the handle material and we will put in a twist. So let's do that now. Big key thing here to keep in mind when you're wanting to do a really nice twist, have everything pre-set up in advance or as close to the material size that you're twisting to begin with. This really does save time, and it allows you to get a lot more work done in that heat. The last thing you want it to do is for where your twisted area is to cool down to like the closest part to you here is, that dark part of the steel. You don't want to be twisting it at that temperature. You want it to be a nice bright yellow to orange in color temperature while you're twisting the stock. It will help prevent stress cracking along the edges. And all in all, just make a much more clean looking twist. So there we went. We went ahead and straightened it up with the vise. Give it a little brush. And now we can move on to the actual handle piece. So for the handle piece, I've got a piece of 5/8 inch square bar, and I'm going to draw down roughly about a 3-inch long taper or so, down to about 3/8 inch on the very end. So we want a 3-inch long taper, tapering down to 3/8 square on the end of itself there. Now, if you haven't figured it out already, what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to be welding this to the 3/8 bar. Now, you could do this traditionally. I ended up just arc welding it together because that's what I had done in the past to make this modern, contemporary type piece. Again, you could forge weld it and make it a bit more traditional here. What this does is this stops you from having to draw all from one piece down from 5/8, where you have a big handle, where you would like to have a bit more grip on it and purchase material than having, say, a 3/8 inch bar to hold on to. This allows you to shortcut that drawing out process all the way to the end. Now, I had to do this specifically because at the time that I originally made this for a customer, I didn't have a power hammer. And so a lot of things on my website, I actually have to recreate things that was 4 or 5 years ago when I didn't even have a power hammer. So I'm basically replicating the same process. So this way I have the same outcome. But there you go. That's a kind of a quick tip for that you don't have to have that. You don't have to have a power hammer for that. So as you can see, here's my little trick. I have now cut this with a bandsaw, and we're going to open that up. So we finished our little 5/8 thing. We're going to use a slitting chisel here to slip it between the piece and just spread out the two legs here. And as you can see, this is going to produce us 2 identical snub end scrolls out on the very end. Now you could do this with spades, you could do this with hearts, you could do this with diamond shapes, you could do this with just a round on the end. Really think of whatever you could cut in 2-dimension. You know, that's a 3-dimensional object that you could cut dead center and make it a flat 2-dimensional object out of it. So now we're going to go ahead and hammer, and what we're doing here is we're upsetting the material in between the legs, so this way it sits flatter against the actual fire pan itself of the shovel. The reason for this being, if you don't do that, you're going to have kind of a crotch. You'll have a little crooked notch in the center of the piece, and it won't sit flush all the way across the metal of the shovel. Again, you can do what you want here. This just happens to be a style choice that I chose to go with. Does not mean that this has to be the style choice you go with. As I said, this technique is a pretty neat technique that I've developed here, of being able to split this thing here in half like that, and it just really makes it pretty quick. And if you do it well enough and you upset enough material out of it for where that splits at, no one will be able to tell how you put that on the end there. They'll be like, did you weld that on or rivet it, or how did it go on there? And there's the result of that. Now on to the final assembly. Now I have already drilled and riveted most of these rivet holes here. I have went through that in depth on other videos on the channel about riveting. I have a whole riveting playlist series, but I just figured I'd show you how to rivet this up in this video. So I left one hole undone so we could end up riveting it. I'm using the square horn on my anvil. If you don't have a square horn, you could just as easily do this on the round horn of your anvil, or a piece of stock that's offset in a vise. You could do that as well. Basically, the method for riveting, you just want to drill your holes. You put one rivet pin, you put both rivet pins in, you peen one down at a time, and that's how you get this all to work out and everything to snug up nicely. If you only put in one rivet in the piece at a time, you put in one rivet, you rivet it down, but you drilled 2 holes, your hole won't line up afterwards. So it's imperative that you rivet this in succession. So you put both rivet pins in, you rivet one down, then you go on to the other. Otherwise, it will shift your holes around on you. So you can see this after some welding it up, and I did some grinding and a little bit of hand forging on it after on the weld joint just to blend everything in nicely. And I also drilled a hole at the very end of the fire poker there. Also drilled the holes in the end. My preferred method for assembly is to drill and rivet. I get asked this all the time. Roy, why didn't you punch the holes instead? And I answer it the same way all the time, and so I'll go ahead and answer it here now while I'm at it. Punching a hole accurately takes a lot of time. It's not as simple as just punching a hole. To do this type of work and get accurate results with punching, you need to punch the hole. If it is required to be a little larger than your punch-sized hole, you have to drift the hole, and then to get it to actual dimensions that the rivets will fit through, you need to ream the hole. So it's a 3-step process, and I find it a lot easier and a lot quicker to just drill the holes. They've had drills, an example of bow drills, all the way back for 5,000 years. So it's not that untraditional to use a drill press to drill your holes here. It really isn't. And there again, that's another thing on my end where I may take a route where somebody else may say, you know what, I feel better about myself if I just punch the holes. Again, I get paid to do this for a living, and part of doing that for a living, you have to make conscientious choices of what you're doing and how long it's taking you. So it's really critical. You have to make sure that you get the job out on time and that the finished result is what the customer was expecting, not necessarily what would have been your favorite way of doing it. So there we are. So now we're going to heat this up and we're going to give this a blacksmith finish. I'm going to heat this whole piece up until it just kind of turns black in the fire. You start seeing some of the heat rings on it like that. I'm also going to heat up the handle itself in stages. And then I'm going to rub all this down with some boiled linseed oil finish. Now you do want this pan to be at a black heat and no hotter if you're going to dump on boiled linseed oil like you're seeing me do here, because boiled linseed oil is highly flammable, so you do not want to do this while it is red hot. Just do not do this while it's red hot. Plus, it just ends up curdling off when it's red hot. It has to be at a black heat if you're going to use this particular type of finish. It's not like a vegetable oil finish where you can get away with it being red hot and you can rub it down and it'll blacken. It really requires a black heat to be done right. So we're just going to rub all surfaces of this, and then I'll also rub down the handle as well. once I get up to that. I'm using a bit of steel wool here because I find that it helps spread the boiled linseed oil without smoking off or catching fire like a rag would, like a blue rag or something of that nature. I try to avoid rags at all costs when I'm using boiled linseed oil, just so this way nothing ever gets mistakenly thrown in the trash and you end up having a shop burned down because of it. And there you go. I'd like to thank all of the channel members that made this possible. You guys are absolutely wonderful. And if you enjoyed this video and you would like to support it, why don't you consider subscribing? And we put out new videos every week. Thank you so much for watching. God bless, and we'll catch you on the next one.